Hello everybody, my name is Sil the DM, and welcome to the first campaign recap for the Frontier. This is my new Thursday session, titled tentatively The Frontier. Um, I used to play or run an Amon Ket campaign, a plane shift campaign, but unfortunately many players just wouldn't make sessions, and one of the players just lives a life where even a once every 2 week campaign is not something they can guarantee on their schedule, and it was really triggering my little if things don't go on the schedule I make for them, I get incredibly depressed button. Um, so I ended up just saying we're going to push that campaign to the side, and if people eventually get their shit together to the point where they can make sessions, we'll play. Um, but I still had the time slot open, so we filled it with a new campaign in my homebrew world that I started putting together that we were calling The Frontier. And unlike all my other sessions where on this channel where everyone sort of joined in, where the channel started so much into the campaign, almost a year for some of them, this is the first session of this game, and you get the recap right away. Um, a, a sort of caveat of warning. The session didn't go quite the way I normally run my first sessions. Normally, I give my players a bit of time to roleplay ahead of time, to sort of fall into the world and bite onto plot hooks and get drawn together a lot more organically. But I had done 9 hours of driving the night before, from 11 at night till 7:30 in the morning, and I had only slept for about an hour and a half, shortly after 7:30 till about 9. And then I was up all day doing Christmas with family, because we went home to visit family. Um, and that would have been the night I'd normally run my Thursday campaign, uh, the Thursday after Christmas. However, I did tell my players that if I got there early enough to spend the day with my family, I wouldn't mind taking the 4 hours to run D&D that night on my laptop. I would just do it upstairs, out of everyone's way, and then I could rejoin the family in the evening. But let me tell you, after being up all of Christmas Day, and then all of Christmas night, and then all of Boxing Day, I was pretty fucking tired. In fact, while setting up my laptop and just sitting there a few minutes early waiting for people to join the session on Discord, I was falling asleep a few times. Um, so when it came time for the campaign, I wasn't super lucid. I got better once the campaign started, and I did feel a little bad because I did the thing I don't like doing where I just told everyone why they're in an area doing this thing. And I basically explained that, and I have access to everyone's backstory, so I didn't do anything I don't think was out of their character's wheelhouse. Um, but our players found themselves within the capital city of the Umoven Swamplands, a place known as Vinheim Fields, a large, massive raised city that comes up out of the swamplands around it, broken into 3 tiers of ever rising lands. Um, Rich with rice farms, rice paddies, and lush fisheries and swampland, which are used for livestock. Um, the players are in the outermost ring, the poorest and one dedicated with the most space dedicated to agriculture, farming, fishing, um, large, many acred uh, ranches within the walls of this raised field. Um, and the players, for their own reasons, either just seeking money or seeking to make a sort of connection in a new city, um, had discovered that a local farm was having some issues with some of its prized livestock going missing. And so the players all met up together. Oh man, let me see if I can go through their names without messing this up. There was a Meryl in Eladrin, Navat a tabaxi monk who was from the north, um, a human-looking rogue who was a friend of Navat, whose name is shit. The player could barely make the session because they were up in the mountains with their family. Echo, Echo, Echo. It's Echo. A human woman named Echo, or a human-looking woman named Echo, a human man named Angel. The three of them had traveled together from the north. Merrill had shown it up around Vinheim Fields about a week earlier and had quickly uh, run out of money, to say the least. And I believe there was only one more player. Let me double check, but I believe that was it. Uh, Echo. Yes. There is only one other player, and their name is Shay. Um, and they were an Earth Genasi. Um, so these players, and again, I normally give players. Normally would have let the players role play their time in the city. Shay and the other three arriving in the city. Emerald getting a little bit of role play in the city, looking for work as they're out of money. Um, I would have had a lot more fun doing that, but because I was in a very sleep deprived state, I basically just went, "You all have been here for a little while and in need of money or other reasons. You've discovered that this ranch, Blackspeckle Ranch, has been having some problem with some of their livestock, and they all, independently, though the group of three decided to go together, uh, journeyed to this ranch, a small picket fence separating the ranch from the rest of the city, and they could see farmhouses off in the distance. From what they'd gathered, they just needed to wait at the fence, at the gate of the fence, and then someone from the farm would come fetch them. Who you can see on the screen right now is a man named Darcy, and they met Darcy Blackspeckle, heir to Blackspeckle Ranch. Um, and Blackspeckle Ranch, as they learned throughout their day and their job, and a bit of interacting with Darcy, is one of the larger ranches in the city that is dedicated to the breeding of giant frogs. The city, Venheim Fields, sort of thrives on different types of livestock: large river fish and swamp fish, trout, uh, giant frogs, which they use for meat, hide, bone, and pest control, and crocodiles, which again they use for meat, bone, and leather. Um, because of the swampland's natural just sort of advantages to those creatures, those are the ones that they breed and raise. And as they're going through and meeting Mr. Darcy here with his suspenders and his work shirt and his little black speckle frog on his shirt, um, they breed two types of frogs. They breed the giant frogs, and they bring regular sized frogs, which they breed as food for the giant frogs. Um, and none of the players are very familiar with the capital. And though giant frogs are a commodity sort of shared all throughout the region, a lot of other places don't focus on them as their primary sort of food source. So all of this was a little neat. And they learned that one of the prized farms, one of the real big uns, had gone missing. And while that was a bit of concern, they also understand that these are frogs in a swamp. And if the frog in the swamp is just in a position where it doesn't want to be seen, even a skilled rancher is probably going to miss them. So frogs disappearing after one or two check-ins, it happens. But the really big ones don't tend to move very much. Once they get so large, they tend to just sit there and, eat whatever comes within their range instead of, moving about the farmland. Uh, so it was a little concerning, and then a few other of their large frogs went missing. Darcy explained that they had called the guard in, the city guard, to try and help, and they did a bit of an investigation, but didn't turn anything up. And he felt it was important enough, while his father was out of town, to hire some help, uh, the players. And he offered them a set amount of gold I believe it was 100 gold for each frog they returned alive, 50 if they returned it dead, plus a flat 250 gold if they returned the large frog alive, and 150 gold if they returned it dead. Um, and the players spent a bit of time talking to him and just getting to know the land and about the frogs. He explained that they've bred their frogs. They don't really view them as like family. They're not pets. They're still livestock. Um, but the frogs, for the most part, won't attack bipeds. At least, medium-sized bipeds. Um, and that if any of the frogs started looking at you funny, and he has this little hammer that hangs from his waist, he just bop them on the head. And they've basically, over generations, have bred these frogs to understand that when they get bopped on the head, they need to stop what they're doing because it's wrong. And basically, everyone who works the farm carries a little hammer, and he just bops them on the head if they're starting to act up or look aggressive. Uh, and he explains that he really would appreciate it if they didn't kill any of his livestock while they're here, if they could help it. Navat had the idea to question about, because that larger frog doesn't really move, where its territory would be. Um, and Darcy sort of explained where it was along the property, because again, this is a many acres long ranch, just a huge chunk of swampland, with a bit of, regular city dry land at the front where the farmhouses are, the barns, the shared living quarters, individual residences, a blacksmith forge, and the main Blackspeckle household. Once the party had sort of just a collective idea of what they were doing, Darcy returned. He had excused himself for a moment, and he came back with a bunch of little frogs, and explained that they use the little frogs as food for the big ones, so if there's ever one that looks like it's going to cause you some trouble, and you don't really want to hit it, or it's just too far away, just chuck one of the little frogs, and it knows that that's food more than you are, and it'll just pounce on it. So, of course, everyone tried to grab themselves a little frog, and I think only Navat managed to successfully hold onto their frog, and he managed to grab two and just sort of stuff them into pockets on his sort of monkey and close them, and the frog's just sort of hopping inside his pockets. Uh, so the group set off, trudging slowly through the swampland. Our Earth Genasi asked if their inability to be slowed by difficult Earth terrain would work on mud, and that was a fun conversation to have. And the answer was no, it doesn't. So they traveled through the swamp, and they spotted some of these massive, like 4 foot, like wide frogs. These medium-sized frogs, human-sized frogs. But none of them seemed to get any aggressive, and in fact, the party was stealthing pretty well thanks to the Earth Genasi's ability to cast Pass Without Trace. They managed to slink along quite well, eventually reaching what they believed to be about the 100-foot radius circle of this larger frog. So they did a sort of fan out and began to search, at which point one of them came under attack. From a swarm of leeches. Just an actual hazard of the swamplands. Occasionally, large swarms of insects and vermin happen. Uh, and this just happened to be a swarm of leeches. Now, unfortunately, in the first round of combat, after taking a little bit of damage, the leeches critically hit with their first attack Navat for 20 damage. Turns out, getting hit for 84 damage at level 1 is pretty rough. But I really don't like killing characters at level 1. I mean, it happens, but I am a bit of a softie as a DM. I like to sort of give the first death in my campaign the pass. I basically will fudge numbers once to make sure that the players don't die. So where 20 damage would have absolutely instantly killed Navath, I instead reduced it to just under the one-shot limit, which I think would have been 17, because Navath had 9 health, and could only take 18 points of damage in a single hit without dying. But Navath was pretty fucked up, and the party began taking this fight very seriously. they managed to save Navat and destroy the leech swarm to the point where it dispersed without anyone else getting too seriously hurt. But Navat was down, stable thanks to some help and some successful medicine checks. I don't really like how the medicine skill works raw. Raw meaning rules as written. Sorry, I don't know if everyone knows that acronym. I don't really love it because the idea that like if someone manages to get eight, like +8 in medicine, they can just stabilize anyone with a 2. I don't like that. It seems more magical than skill based at that point. Uh, and so I'm probably going to change the rules a little bit for medicine checks, or at least make the DC more difficult, or just let the medical checks apply past saving throws or past death saves instead of just instantly stabilizing someone. Because it just seems a little broken. Once the character manages to get +10 medicine, they literally can never fail the medicine check to stabilize someone, and it's just they instantly stabilize anyone they touch, and I don't like that. But Navat wasn't conscious, and this becomes pretty important in a little bit because no one in the group has any sort of healing yet. That's not really a huge issue in D&D 5e. It's something a DM should consider when making their campaigns, but the player who was originally going to play more of a healing character had to drop out because of their new school semester, the schedule conflicting, which made them quite upset. Uh, it's not an undoable thing. And again, with some classes, a lot of classes are going to get their own form of self-sustain or healing later. But at level 1 and level 2, it's going to be a little tight, as the players felt. The other players did a little bit of exploring around the area, while Angel sort of kept Navat safe. And they all ended up very slowly getting sucked into this pile of mud that it was very clear that very large frog was using as a sort of throne, and it sort of pulled up mud beneath itself to sit just below the surface of the water and strike at any food that came into its range. Um, After they'd done a little struggling with it, one of the players ended up getting sucked down, and another player trying to help that person ended up getting sucked in as well. At which point, Emerald, not wanting to just be left alone and fearing for the other members of the group, went in, leaving Angel, the human, up top with the unconscious Navat, who's just floating in swamp water. Uh, and this is where we got to the real meat, the big fight of the session. They fell down into a cavern and lit a torch, which, thanks to a natural 20, was still lightable. Uh, after being drugged through the swamp all day and then through the mud. They realized they were in a small chamber that had been opened beneath the swamp. And it looked like it had a few exits at the corner. And in the chamber were the bodies of 3 giant frogs. One looking fairly decayed, the other 2 looking quite normal, but each of them having almost this perfectly circular hole cut open between their eyes into their skull, which the torchlight revealed was just an empty cavity. Like something had punctured and consumed their brains, which had the players respectively freaked out. At which point, Amaro was going to go up to let Angel know what was happening, and Shay, the Earth Genasi, was pushing the Eladrin up through the mud when Echo noticed a 4th frog poke its eyes up from beneath one of those sort of entrances, subterranean sort of aquatic entrances to the cave. And they flopped their ability to try and push Amaro through the mud pretty hard. So Amaro ended up getting poisoned and swallowing a lot of things that you shouldn't put in your mouth. Uh, and it was at that point that the group noticed the frog. This frog, large, horse-sized, because again, this was the quote prized frog unquote, the big bad, as it were, the head honcho. The frog's skin had gone pallid, almost pea green, with these faded tan lines that were once brown, and gray flecks where they used to have black speckles. Because again, the Blackspeckle Ranch, they breed Blackspeckle frogs. It's their whole thing. Its yellow eyes were cloudy and fogged. and a third eye was between them. This eye had a sort of red color to it and a purple iris. That looked like it was glowing, and as it pulled its way up out of the mud, they could see that dangling down from its upper lip were these long, slimy, and like pea green soup tentacles. And then they started fighting, as they should. And this frog uh, started unleashing powerful vibrations that were having an effect psionically on the players. What attack it performed? Uh, the opening attack, I believe, dazed someone, I believe Shay, preventing Shay from doing more than one action on their turn, so they can either do an action, a bonus, or a movement. Uh, and the frog decided to engage at this point, uh, and I believe it attacked someone and did a fair bit of damage. But during their turn, Echo, the rogue, who had dove and hid behind one of the other frog horses, charged in for a sneak attack. And, oh no, it jumped and bit onto a barrel and started the process to swallowing it whole. It grappled the Eladrin. Uh, Shay and Echo moved in. Shay couldn't attack that turn because she had been dazed by this psionic attack, thanks to it forcing her to make an intelligence saving throw, which as a barbarian you can imagine she's not very good at. And Echo the Rogue, who had managed to hide fairly well, managed to deal some pretty decent sneak attack damage to this weird frog, which they were already calling an Illa frog, like an Illithid, or a Mind Flayer. The frog on its next turn used a bonus action to emit this low resonating thum, and both players failed their saving throw this time, uh, making them lose their reaction and have their movement speed halved until the end of their next turn. It's sort of this sluggish psionic reverberation that slows their reflexes, and gave the frog the freedom to hop away and finish swallowing a barrel. Once inside the frog's mouth, a barrel, who was pretty hurt already, saw its tongue had almost altered and become this weird alien-esque second mouth, this massive worm inside its mouth, with this perfectly round mouth that looked very reminiscent to the holes that were punched into the other frogs' bodies. So Meryl was freaking out, to say the least. And I believe Meryl cast a psychic spell, dealing a bit of damage to the frog in the process. Uh, the next turn, everyone spent their actions getting a bit closer, I believe. Shay threw a javelin and actually ended up doing pretty decent damage to the frog, thanks to just really good rolls. And sadly, dealing a fair bit of damage to Emerald as well, which Emerald was not happy with, as the javelin that sort of cut into the frog also scratched and cut along Emerald. And that was when Echo ran in and threw a dagger. And at this point, the frog was pretty beat up because even with its weird psionic abilities, the frog was still just a frog. It had slightly better stats than a giant frog, and if people are curious, I could post the stat block for it and all the other actions it had access to. Its psionic powers, which were just the two that happened. Uh, had it managed to spend another round and successfully eat Ameryl's brains, which I would have killed Ameryl for, just saying. The party had their one I fudged the numbers to keep you alive moment. Uh, if it had another round, it probably would have been able to kill Emerald, or at least eat enough of Emerald's intelligence to gain enough temporary hit points to maybe be a bigger threat. But a barbarian and a rogue deal a lot of damage. Just putting that out there. A lot more than most other classes. And Echo made a dagger attack, and with how much health the frog had left, it was literally a straight 50-50 chance on the damage die whether or not the frog would live. If Echo rolled a 1 or a 2, the frog would have lived another turn. If it rolled a 3 or a 4, the frog would have died, and he ended up rolling a 3. Uh, Jumping up, using Shay, the large earth genasi, as a sort of lift to get a better angle, he chucked the dagger directly into the third eye of the frog, killing it. During this whole fight, which lasted about 3 rounds, about 3 very suspenseful rounds, and rounds take a bit of time in D&D when you're running with a large group of players. NL was up top, like, moving further away from the sounds that were happening underground, especially as wildlife was reacting to the sound that the frogs were producing. Uh, yeah, like, NL was just sort of dragging Navat's body along. Once they managed to get a marrow out of the body, and everyone had a moment to just catch their breath and be freaked out, uh, the Shay pushed everyone up. They set up a rope and started pulling out the frog bodies, tying the frog bodies together on the rope, and then Shay dragging the bodies through the swamp to return them to Darcy, because again they needed to return with the bodies to collect their pay. Uh, and everyone was pretty shook, and Edhel was a little apologetic because they had each round elected to stay with Navat, not wanting to leave their unconscious friend because there'd be no one there to protect Navat if one of the other frogs came along and tried to eat it. Which actually happened a few times as they were making the trip back. Frogs became too curious in the dead frogs or Navat, and had to get bopped on the head or kicked on the head, or the 2 little frogs that Navath had in his pockets were thrown away as bait. Uh, it was a whole trip. Upon making it back to shore and then starting to drag the frogs along, Shay ended up taking a level of exhaustion just from the sheer force of all the dragging that she was doing. Because while the regular giant frogs only weigh about 250 pounds each, the large-sized giant frog weighed close to 1,000 pounds. It was like an 800-pound frog. Uh, so yeah, and Shay has like 20 strength or some shit, which in Pathfinder would easily let you drag this much weight. But this is D&D 5e, where they want things to not be as crazy sometimes. And I don't hate that or disrespect it. I do think dragging this much weight should make Shay exhausted, so I made Shay get exhausted for it. Some of the farmhands saw them exiting the swamp and went and got a hold of Darcy, and Darcy was shook by what had happened, but very glad that everyone was alive. It was around this time that Navat had woken up and caught up on what had happened. He was feeling a little upset as well because he had missed out on what was going on, and felt like he hadn't really helped because he was out of the entire fights, basically, having been dropped in the first round of combat with the leeches. Darcy, however, was extremely happy that they were all right, invited them to use his bathhouse, and joined him and his family for supper that night, and then they would give them their payment. Uh, and the players took him up on that, tapping into a natural hot spring bath, which exists in the back of the slaughterhouse, where the ranch processes the frogs they process for meat, cure, prepare, and then sell to businesses in the city. And while they were busy bathing in this bath, they spent a little bit of time talking, and some of the farmhands cleaned their clothes. When they returned to get dressed, Echo was still, or sorry, it was Amaro, I think, who was still a little shook. No, had to have been Echo, who was just a little confused and was like putting their clothes on wrong. Uh, and Shay ended up rather embarrassing the female farmhand that came into the women's changing room to return their clothes, because she's never seen like an extremely tall, naked Earth Genasi woman, and it was a fun scene. We were having a lot of fun with roleplay, and at this point, I was more into being awake, though still tired. I was able to add more flavor to everything, and I wasn't just browbeating them into things like I did at the start of the campaign, which I don't like doing, but everyone seemed to have fun. After their bath and getting their clothes clean, they rejoined the main house, where they met some strangers. They also met one of Darcy's cousins, a little boy named Daryl, who's about 13, who looks like he's working hard on the farm to sort of earn his keep, quote unquote. Uh, they met Daryl and Daryl's parents, probably uh, very close relatives of Darcy's, maybe his first cousins, uh, or possibly even one of his siblings and their spouse. They didn't really ask and didn't learn their names. Uh, they also met a dwarf woman, uh, as well as a gnomish man who was sort of acting as her bodyguard. And they sat down and enjoyed a feast prepared by uh, Darcy's aunt, who everyone just referred to as Cookie. And it was a very southern kind of feast. Frog, either deep fried, sort of battered frog, or butter roasted, uh, butter seared, just sort of frog that was fried in a pan, just swimming in butter. Rich vegetables covered in spices and seasonings, and mashed potatoes with this thick white creamy gravy. And just chatting and having a good time talking and learning a little bit more about the farm and just a little bit about the city. Not very much, but just talking and having a bit of fun with these various NPCs they met. After which they all shared a dessert and some booze. Uh, and Navad mentioned how much he enjoyed the sweet dessert that was provided, shaved ice with a sort of syrup, as well as the scotch they had. I believe it was scotch, might have been whiskey. And Darcy was being so appreciative of what they were doing that he told Navad he'd try to get recipes from Cookie, whatever she was comfortable sharing, because he explained that the whiskey was brewed in house, as is of course all the other food. It was all made here by Cookie and old family recipes and whatnot, and that had Navad very excited. Uh, at which point, the guests left, and Darcy pulled out their coin, 300 gold each. To which some of the players felt like really guilty taking. Navad didn't say no, but Navad also was aware that he hadn't done anything for the fight. And Edhel also was like, man, I did sign up and do the job, but I also didn't do the job. And in fact, Shay and Amaro both tried to give 100 gold back. And I gave them the chance to roll persuasion, and they really flopped it. So Darcy was adamant they take their pay and even offered them a place to stay for the night at the sort of log house, a communal sleeping house, a few buildings over. Only about four of the crew, the farmhands, actually sleep there. Most of them have their own homes in the sort of farming houses, this little farming village. Uh, but they were given the option of crashing there if they wanted. The party decided to take him up on that. And I believe that was where we ended the session. And we leveled up to level 2, which is a little bit faster than I normally level players up, but that the Swarm of Leeches was a relatively difficult CR, and the Illifrog was a really cool, interesting challenge. Uh, and I think it's a good pace. I'm definitely not going to be leveling them up this quickly all the time, but we had a lot of fun with the session, and I think leveling them up there were the right move. I want to thank everyone for coming by and listening to me ramble about this new campaign. If you have any questions, comments, or inquiries about the setting or the world the players are playing in, or the characters, or anything like that, uh, hit me up with them in the comment section below. Hit the subscribe button. Slam that bell, guys. You know, all those cool YouTube things that I never say or mean. But if you did, would also make me very happy. Have a great day and a very happy new year.